No mai, haere mai. Welcome to Cult Chat, the podcast where we talk about control, coercion, and all things cultish. I'm Dr. Caroline Ansley. I'm a medical doctor. As a child, I lived at the notorious Centrepoint community, and now I run a website that advocates for former Centrepoint children.
I'm Liz Gregory, and I lead the Gloriavale Leavers Support Trust. I've spent the last decade helping people exit Gloriavale and journeying with them and building new lives.
I'm Lindy Jacob. I'm a former member of the Exclusive Brethren, and I'm part of the Olive Leaf Network, an initiative that supports people leaving high-demand religious groups.
Come with us as we unpack the cult playbook, talk to leavers and experts of coercive and controlling groups, and call for Kiwis to cult-proof their lives.
Join us as we traverse the cultiverse.
A warning, this podcast contains references to subjects and discussions which may be difficult for some people to hear. Please take care of yourselves and your whānau when listening.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to Cult Chat. This is part B of an episode called Setting the Record Straight in Gloriavale. If you'd like to watch part A and part B, just head to the show notes and look for the YouTube links. We're continuing on with this episode where journalist Rebecca Wright from News Hub's The Nation went to Parliament to talk to some politicians about their response into Gloriavale. Leavers and some current members were pretty disturbed with what they heard, and so we've compiled this video response for them. Some contributors asked to have their voices removed or disguised for this. Fear still remains in Gloriavale. Please remember that the opinions expressed belong to those of the participants. They may not represent other leavers, current members, Gloriavale Leavers Support Trust, or Cult Chat. Throughout this podcast, we'll be stopping to have a chat with our hosts, Kaz and Lindy, as they bring their experiences to the table. So let's head over and watch as Rebecca Wright from The Nation chats to Kelvin Davis, head of Oranga Tamariki in New Zealand.
I want to ask you about Gloriavale and Oranga Tamariki's involvement there. Can you tell me what's happening down at Gloriavale in your portfolios?
Well, Oranga Tamariki has been working quite closely on the situation. Obviously, the safety of those young people is most important. There's a number of things that have been going on, and the situation changes. Recently, that one of the leaders there was outed
and accused of sex crimes.
Yeah, that's right. So Oranga Tamariki is again supporting, making sure that those the young people have the support they need.
And how is it doing that?
Well, it's engaging quite closely. There's somebody down there on the west coast that is going in there, working with the community, engaging with them, making sure that social workers are in there talking to them. So it's quite a comprehensive response.
Two current members of Gloriavale set the record straight.
Someone is probably here once a week, but it's not like there's just someone 24/7 that you could walk up and talk to. They're normally there just for a specific reason, like a planned meeting. My kids wouldn't know how to contact them or find them.
My children know who the child protection leads are. They are on posters around the community, but they wouldn't have a chance of finding the outside people.
Back to Rebecca Wright.
Do you sort of get that for most New Zealanders, hearing that there are 350 children being exploited in a religious community, also potentially subject to sex abuse, is just an outrage?
Well, yeah, but it's a community, and how do you shut down a community?
Serena Pilgrim, a former member of Gloriavale, responds.
I've never once said I wanted the place shut down. I just want change.
Another former Gloriavale member expresses his opinion.
People need to understand that everyone in Gloriavale is suffering some form of abuse every day, and it's not going to stop until the cult is disbanded. But the children, being the most vulnerable, should be the first priority.
Former member Virginia Courage has something to say.
We're going into a small town and say, we're going to shut down the small town. You can't.
Why not? Why can't you shut down a community? Does it have some little haloed box around it that says we're untouchable? I thought if you broke the law, you broke the law. That's like saying that there's a town full of crime and sexual perversion. But because there's some isolated, remote community, we're not going to do anything.
Gloriavale leaver Melody Pilgrim helps us understand.
I know that they do feel like the government's going to come in and save us. That's kind of their thinking, or the government's going to come and save us. We'll just keep suffering here until the government comes and saves us. But if the government isn't coming, who's going to save them? And that's people's way that's how they think in there. And I'm just like, what am I going to say to my nieces and nephews in there? I'm just like, sorry, the government didn't want to come and save you. You had to, you had to suffer in there and keep getting exploited for labour and abuse till we could come and get you out through the court system, because they're victims. They can't actually save themselves. Some of them don't know how. They're trapped in this cycle of abuse and torture, and they actually don't know how to get out of it. They need help.
A current Gloriavale member expresses their concern.
It gave me the feeling that they're not actually watching our backs. And realistically, they don't. The reality is you're on your own. At least you could uphold our rights. That's quite devastating. Like if you're already on the edge, that would creep you a bit closer.
Someone inside Gloriavale gives them ideas.
They could pretty much strip away the charitable trust from them if they really wanted to. Surely there's a legal way they can make it work. Because they haven't really been a proper charitable trust. I don't think that the schooling quality is very good. There must be something they can do. I mean, how do you have a school going like that when they don't have enough trained proper teachers?
Let's head back to Rebecca Wright and Calvin Davis.
It's important that the agencies are there doing the job they need to do to make sure that those children are protected.
And are you sure that they're protected?
Well, there has been comprehensive support going in there, yes.
Gloriavale leaver Virginia Courage questions this.
They're putting in support. Who are they supporting? They're not supporting the children. They're supporting a structure.
So you are sure that they are protected and safe?
Yeah, it was only a couple of weeks ago that we had our latest update. We've been meeting regularly with the people who are on the West Coast working in the Gloriavale communities.
A Gloriavale member makes comment.
He's obviously relying heavily on the multi-agency approach that they are going to do the job properly, to bring about a healthy community like every other town. People have autonomy. People have the basic rights upheld and protected.
Back to Rebecca Wright.
But you can't, the Prime Minister can't say they're safe, not being exploited. Priyanka Radhakrishnan can't say they're safe and not being exploited. And it doesn't sound like you can say that they're safe and not being exploited.
Well, what we're doing is putting in the support, making sure that those children are being protected. They have someone to go to, that the Oranga Tamariki is there and is there regularly to make sure that their needs have been looked after.
A recent Gloriavale leaver gives his thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, I think the government's, kind of made it as safe as possible, like that they can do now without shutting the place down. But, they could definitely do more.
Former member Virginia Courage acknowledges the difficulties for the police.
Yes, the police have been working. It's very difficult for them because Gloriavale has had decades of thinking so poorly about what they should do with these people, and it's very difficult for the police to actually get the information they need. But if this minister here actually interviewed leavers, he would find out very quickly the people that need arresting.
Back to Rebecca Wright.
Is it just too big and it's gone on for too long now to get control of and to shut it down?
No, I don't think, well, it's a community. How do you shut down a community?
Here's Virginia and David Courage's response.
How do you shut down a community? It's important that the agencies are...
It's a community, so if the children are unsafe and they're being abused, what are we supposed to do?
I'm lost for words. How... And these are the people running this country. These are the people. This guy is the guy who's meant to be making sure kids are safe in New Zealand.
When did a way of living outweigh the safety of children? That's a lifestyle choice.
Back to Calvin Davis.
It's like going into a small town and saying, we're going to shut down the small town. You can't. It's like going into a small town. It's like going into a small town.
Ooh, the small town example didn't go down too well with this current resident.
The system of Gloriavale is not like a town. It's like a communist Nazi dictatorship. Like China. We're going to try and control everything everybody does. That's what Gloriavale's always been like. In a town you might have a mayor who's elected. Or a village where everybody's free to come and go, nobody's controlling them. As soon as they feel like they can't control someone, they want them gone. Because anybody that's not controlled is destabilizing.
Former member Hopeful Disciple tells you what he thinks.
Well, in our describing of what we grew up in to our counsellor, he said it sounds more like kind of a East Germany communist type arrangement.
A current member of Gloriavale disagrees with the small town idea.
I don't think that's accurate. I think that's a cop-out. It's not like every other town. The mayor doesn't tell the household what to do, doesn't dictate who can marry who, when you're going to marry, how long your courtship is going to be, or dictate your religion. He doesn't dictate what education you're going to receive, or you're not going to receive. He doesn't have that kind of jurisdiction. But to say it's a community like every other community, I think that's inaccurate, and I think there's a typical political dodge.
Back to Virginia Courage.
It's not a little small town. A better example would be in a prison.
Former member Victory Disciple sets the record straight.
Growing up in a place like Gloriavale, it's like living in a gang. So you develop all those strategies to survive. And then when you become a revered member, you use those strategies to protect the place. It's just how it is. The social pressure and the loyalty system there. Your loyalty is stolen or you give it up for the benefits of the group. Your natural loyalties, like to your parents or your family or your husband or your children, are all destroyed because your loyalty is now given over to the group. And at every step, it's just self-preservation rather than actual good relationship being built.
Virginia Courage comments.
Government is trying to paint a different picture about what's actually going on in Gloriavale by trying to put in the public's mind that they're like a small town. Yet they're not a small town. It's a privately owned property. It has a trust structure. It's a private school, private kindergartens. It's not a small town. You have to sign in there if you're a visitor. What small town in New Zealand do you have to go to the council chambers and sign in? That is not a small town. It might sound more like a prison visit, visiting a prisoner. I don't know of any small town in New Zealand, if you needed to visit, let's say, a doctor or a dentist, whether you'd have to go and get permission from the mayor, and then you would have to go and talk to another person who makes the appointment for you, and they would slot you in maybe in 2 months' time, and you don't have the money to pay for your own appointment. Someone else pays for that because you don't have any money. They've taken it off you. Oh, no, sorry, actually, you were sharing it. And then you would have to go in on a town trip, which you would be driven there to your appointment and then driven back home. So that doesn't sound like any small town that I know of in New Zealand.
Gloriavale leaver Melody Pilgrim has something to say.
Well, it might be a small town, but if they're breaking the law, then you've got to go in and do something. You've got to change the way they're living. The whole way they're living there is set up to protect people that are abusing and to keep the victims there all in the same place. And if they haven't seen that by now, I don't know what's going through their minds. And that's the whole reason that they've got to go up there and separate them and separate everyone out. They can't all live together like they do. It's not safe.
Gloriavale leaver David Courage asks a very disturbing question.
Where in New Zealand does OT or the police have to make an appointment to go and talk to someone? I was party to meetings held in the community where they told us that that is how it was going to work. That's the leadership made those deals with OT and the police, how they were allowed to come into the community.
Well, welcome back, ladies. What are your thoughts on some of those contributions?
Oh my giddy aunt. What Melody and David and Virginia were saying as they pulled apart that analogy of the small town. When I heard, what's his name, the commissioner?
Calvin Davis.
When I actually heard him say it, there was something very intoxicating about that analogy. You know, like you almost wanted to believe it. It was so simplistic. And I think they absolutely nailed it, how they pulled the whole thing apart and just said, you know, like, what small town? You know, like, yes, a communist Chinese or communist German town, you know, like Eastern Europe, Eastern Germany town, you know, like sure, yeah, that's the kind of town. But would we tolerate that in this country? And absolutely we shouldn't. And
but we have for 50 years.
We have.
And the government knew about it because it was the police prosecutors that they prosecuted Hopeful Christian for his crimes in the 90s. And you read the judgments and it's plain as day. The Crown prosecutors are like, this guy has used controlling tactics. You know, they knew what was going on, the coercive, manipulative environment. So, yep, the Crown has known this.
I just wonder how much, if we did genuinely have a non-religious communist, shall we say, because that's the word that keeps getting chucked around, village here somewhere in, you know, South Canterbury or, you know, Central Auckland even, would it be tolerated if it wasn't religious? Is that part of it? Is it the whole religious freedom thing that makes us sort of somehow not shocked by the extreme control? Or
I think it's a protective factor. I think that's why they haven't been touched. I think governments are nervous to touch what they consider to be religious freedoms.
Because it is more like a prison.
Yeah, they you know, when they spelled it, I agree with you, Kaz, that, you know, when you listen to that guy, you're like, yeah, like it could be hard to shut down a whole community, but when they point out when the Leavers, pointed out some of those things, like that you have to sign in to even enter the property, or that the police or the frontline services have to make an appointment with the leadership to meet with a member, you're like, yeah, that is, and pointing out that all of it's privately owned and tied up in a set of privately owned trusts.
Charitable trusts too. By the way,
we've got measures in this country to hold accountable privately owned institutions and organisations.
Businesses, you can close down businesses through if there's poor business things happening. Incredible.
Exactly. And one of the Leavers did, I can't quite remember exactly what they said, but they commented on there is that questionnaire of the charity services and them sort of trotting in and out and not being willing to touch it again. And you're just like, hang on, how is this charitable?
Oh, yeah, I can do a whole episode on the charity services side. I just want to point out that Melody Pilgrim, I met Melody prior to leaving Gloriavale. We shared special moments together, an afternoon actually, and she was a crushed, very quiet, withdrawn, upset, pale, thin, just loss of human animation. It was very upsetting, but we cried together actually, and I knew that clearly she was on a journey out of there, and just look at her now.
She's awesome. Man.
Incredible. They're incredible, aren't they? And David Courage, this is his first time doing anything public, and boy, he's, packing a few punches. It's genuine. You can tell these guys have lived experience. They know what they're talking about. And so politicians, you need to listen up. These are not a group of bitter people who are just out to destroy Gloriavale for some, religious persecution reason. No, they have real issues. Oh, well, shall we head back and listen to some more?
What we can do is hold the people who are perpetrators to account.
Virginia Courage contributes again.
According to the boys' employment case, which has now been finished for over a year, the government hasn't done anything yet to hold anyone accountable. Well, I wish they would do it. If they can do it, why haven't they done it yet?
Ex-Gloriavale member Melody Pilgrim urges the government to do something more quickly.
And if you're happy to sit back and wait, like, oh yeah, it took a year for this to come through, and we'll just get the perpetrators as we find them. Well, that might take another 12 years. You're leaving it all up to the people who've been injured and victims themselves to get out and spend their time, and with the lawyers and the Gloriavale Leavers Support Trust, you're expecting them to do all the work.
And to make sure that there is the support in there, both for the young people, the children, and also other people that are affected by what's going on. It is a complex situation, but government agencies, not just Oranga Tamariki, but other agencies are in there as well, supporting the community.
Virginia Courage tries to help him understand.
There just seems to be a huge disconnect with what he's saying about what they've implemented. They don't even have a cell phone tower there. So they're not able to actually go and contact OT without using the Gloriavale system. So I'm not sure how he thinks the support system even works when they can't do what every other New Zealander out here can do. And how does a child talk to one of these OT helpers that are going in? Do they make an appointment with who? Do they just go and knock on the door of your open office? I mean, how is this even working practically inside Gloriavale? You're talking to children who've been told for the last 10 years that they're not to talk to anyone outside the community. They're taught to distrust them. They're told that the world is evil and full of people who want to harm them. Why would they go to this person for help? See, we keep coming back to the same issue. It's what Gloriavale teaches their people. Because what you teach someone you teach it long enough, they'll believe it, they'll do it themselves, and they'll teach their children. I know, I did it. There are people who have been brave enough to start some of these processes, but the risk is huge for them. They get told that they're not, that they've got no forgiveness. They were damning their soul. They were walking away from their convictions as a Christian, that they weren't keeping the scripture because dare any of you go to law. These were the scriptures that were said to them. So the support issue, it's just a word. It has very little meaning.
Rebecca Wright nails it.
It looks like a multi-generational systemic failure.
Well, look, again, this is a community.
Virginia comments again.
And he keeps reverting back to the fact, well, they're a community, they're a small town, so basically I can't do anything. The issue's been proven in court that it's the management structure of this small town or community that's at fault. So he's saying that he can't do anything about that. That's also saying that the safety of the children and the women is not the important thing. And he's obviously not ensuring it because he hasn't removed the people that are causing the problem.
Mm-hmm. Welcome back. Let's have a wee chat about what we've heard, eh? It sounded like there's dozens of social workers and OT workers up there. Did you get the feeling there's heaps of things happening up there?
Well, yeah, there's a comprehensive response. Somebody is going in there. That's what Calvin Davis, the children's minister, said, and that's what I wrote down, a comprehensive response.
Put it this way, 3 years ago when the mass, boy-on-boy sexual stuff came out, yes, there was a lot going on. There were vehicles rolling up and in and out every day. They had police, they had START programs, which is like some ability to access some counselling. There was a STOP program, helping, rewire the brain around, good sexual thinking. And there was a response. They were writing policies. They had some great groups going in, working. Yes, they had internal investigations happening, external, all sorts. Yes. But today, it's not like resident social workers or anything. So Harold the giraffe was there earlier this year. Yeah, and police went in with Keeping Our Cells Safe program.
There's a big disconnect between what a social worker will recognise and understand to be harmful and what a child reared in a cauldron of harm understands to be harmful. And, that reminds me of some conversations I've had with adults from Centrepoint reflecting on their childhood. And the number of times people have said to me, they've actually said things along the lines, they've told me this awful story of sexual abuse in this very not a shocking way, in a really matter of fact unemotional kind of way in which there's a huge incongruence between the facts that they're sharing and the tone of voice and the distress they're expressing. And I've said, that was abuse. And they've looked at me and they've said, was it? My problem, of course, is exactly this point, when what you're living through is just normal.
That's right.
How can you possibly say it was harmful? It's normal. You know, like stepdad getting into bed with me while we're naked and having a little bit of naked play together. That's just normal, isn't it? That's not sexual abuse. In fact, why would I even think to mention it?
That's exactly right.
Why would I even mention it? Because it's
not only that, but if you're being told that suffering or discomfort you feel is part of having your pathway to heaven lined, then again, why would you mention it?
Someone, I can't remember who it was talking about the harm that happens. It's not just all sexual abuse. And it just really reminded me of my own personal experience, having lived at Centrepoint as a 7-year-old and feeling very, very unsafe in the time that I was there. And I was sexually abused. And the thing is, for me, as I was sort of, as an adult, trying to tell people in my life what happened to me at Centrepoint, I really struggled for a long time to communicate what it was like. And no one really understood. And it wasn't until I kind of, like, I remember a penny dropped in my head. And I remember realizing that I needed to tell people that I'd been sexually abused for them to understand. And for me, it was, if I'd never been sexually abused at Centrepoint, it wouldn't have really changed my experience one iota, because of the fear, the sense of that I didn't have any control, the sense that my personal experience was irrelevant, my feelings were relevant, my needs weren't important to be met. But everybody else understood sexual abuse and they honed straight in on that. Yeah. And so my story changed. And now I was sexually abused when I was at Centrepoint, because people could get that. But actually, it was just one of the things that happened.
Yes.
You know, so like I really identify with that statement that someone made about that, because it's like, people outside these groups can understand physical harm, but they really don't get psychological harm.
No.
And it's so, so powerful, and it's terrifying. And yeah.
That's amazing. Thanks for sharing that. It reminds me of a couple of leavers who were also sexually harmed at Gloriavale, but they've said to me, it wasn't actually the sexual abuse so much that was the most traumatic thing. For them, it was the aftermath of the abuse, living in a place like Gloriavale, where it gets uncovered and you get shamed and blamed and you're brought before a meeting and the victim blaming, and you see what happens to the person that was the perpetrator. They get a free pass, but you might risk, perhaps not getting married, or you've got this, you carry the weight of it and the guilt, and they say that is the most damaging thing that they believe happens to them.
Exactly. That's group psychological abuse, really, and abandonment, you know.
That's a really interesting point, Kaz, and I wonder if again some of these politicians or our government is like the people who heard you and that still kind of just thinking that it's just about the servitude or just about the sexual harm, whereas the leavers and so many others are trying to point out that it's part of something so much bigger. And like I've been fascinated to learn in recent months and years that in many places internationally, like emotional or psychological abuse is criminalized, and that coercive control is criminalized in relationships too. Yeah. Whereas here in New Zealand, those kinds of things, as far as I know, are still not actually spelled out as being criminal.
No, and that's the difficulty. Police say, well, what can we do about it? Well, if you think the coercive control is so deep that it looks like slavery, servitude, or forced labor, then there's heaps you can do about it, because that is illegal. But you're right. On the face of it, they're in territory they've never been in.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. And so when leavers do these police sort of exit interviews, and I remember looking at the big list of questions that got sent to the leavers ahead of it, and I thought, well, these interviews are going to go on for weeks and hours, but all that allocated was about 2 or 3 hours. I remember thinking, you're not even going to, it's sort of drop in the ocean. These people can speak for days and weeks and months about their experience, and they will miss out massive swathes of it, and you'll be sitting there maybe in a lawsuit, you're sitting in court, and they'll just pop out with something, and the lawyers will be like, why didn't they tell us that? It's like there's too many stories, there's too much to remember. Sometimes they don't remember things till they're triggered by it, and it's like, oh, I remember the time so and so said and did that. We're like, wow, that's a crucial piece of information and evidence, but it's all packaged up, the boiled frog.
And if you were taught your whole life by a controlling leadership that what you think, what you feel, what you know to be true, what you remember is wrong, and you need to distrust it.
Yeah.
And you therefore you're basically gaslighted every minute of every day of your life.
Entirely.
How on earth could you take that to you have to have confidence, you have to believe yourself. You have to have self-trust to have a testimony, to be a witness to your own experience. But it's utterly eroded by this process of subjugation and indoctrination, and then you come out and you're expected to come out of the group, however you get out eventually, and you're expected to somehow have a coherent recollection of events. It's kind of preposterous, really.
It is. And what did Melody say? She said, and you're just leaving it up to the victims, to us, the ones who've suffered, the ones we've got a lot going on to deal with this. They're basically, the plea is to the government, please deal with this so we don't have to. Oh, well, shall we head back and listen to some more?
And we can't just shut down a community.
A current member of Gloriavale expresses their opinion.
Kelvin Davis said about 3 times, or you can't just shut down a community. But if the community was full of serious wrongdoing and systemic intergenerational bad stuff, it's not just going to change.
Former member David Courage starts to get a little bit wound up.
Is that like the 3rd or 4th time he's said that? In the space of maybe a minute and a half? If government changes, this guy has 6 weeks just to sit at his desk and do nothing. And it's someone else's problem. That is a cop-out and a failure on his part. And Gloriavale sold them the Kool-Aid too. And they've drunk it.
Back to what Kelvin Davis can do.
But we can go in and hold the people who are perpetrators to account, and we can make sure that the young people there are getting support they need.
Another Gloriavale resident comments. The response to the media by government representatives shows that they are ignoring things. They are political, and so their focus right now is on public opinion around their parliament elections. Our Gloriavale issues may not be a concern for the voting public, but well done to my family for speaking out and for all who are keeping the pressure on to bring awareness to the issues here. A person part of Gloriavale talks about how difficult this is.
I feel quite depressed. I feel a bit let down. It gave confidence that Gloriavale can keep barreling along and doing whatever they have been doing for the past 20 years. It wasn't like there was going to be effective change. While there is heat on, there will be tokens of change, although there is a little more loosening up on people, like getting permission to go to town, etc. I think the leadership need a clear pathway laid out for them to know how to change and how to move forward and what the government's looking for. Otherwise, they're going to make up their own pathway as they deem fit. And of course, they are going to think their pathway is fine and biblical and guaranteed to be holding on to the traditions of the community as much as possible.
Former member Victory Disciple had this to say.
They could change every physical thing about Gloriavale and yet still enslave people. Because it's the mindset that people are held in. Well, we've heard of instances where people do have their own bank account, they all have a card, but yet they are questioned as to what they're doing with the money. oh, we've given them their own money now. So what? They still can't escape whatever the leaders say tomorrow. The leaders could take it all away as soon as the pressure stops. I don't call that having your own money, because how can you have your own money when you don't even have your own life?
They might keep some.
And risk being called Ananias and Sapphira. Yeah, the threat of death. Is it a death threat to someone in Gloriavale?
They're signing all that money back to the partnership, and it has to be given back or be kicked out as a partner.
Another young Gloriavale leaver who's never spoken publicly before said this.
I don't know, like it just makes me angry, actually furious watching that.
Melody Pilgrim wants answers.
When I was a child, we was the government. We were the ministers, the politicians. There was no one. And the children in there don't have a voice. Even the people, the adults themselves, were victims as children. They don't even really have a voice. Children are still living a life of servitude and slavery in there. You've got the power to do something, and if you're not willing to do anything, then you should step aside and let someone who's willing to do the job and take it on and not be afraid. Not be afraid to do something good for people. Let's get someone in who can actually do the job, who's not afraid to be uncomfortable and actually do the job. I mean, these people, they have the rights of all the other New Zealanders in the country as well. And the way that they're laid back about it, they're treating them like they're second-class citizens. So how many politicians are there? And only two of them have contacted you. It's like, where are they? What are they doing?
Back to Virginia and David Courage.
The other side of this is that Gloriavale uses the people in power, the agencies reporting as public, weaponised distractions from the actual issues, saying, well, OT's happy with us. They come in here. You know, we've got these multi-agencies in here. We've had this many visits. They use this in the court case. The reason OT and the police are visiting you is because there's harm done. They're not visiting you because you're so good and you engage with agencies because you're safe. Living there, I know Gloriavale's good at saying what they need to convince an agency.
Maybe they should subpoena 30 years of recordings that Gloriavale has, and then maybe find out a thing or two about what's actually said and thought inside Gloriavale. Recordings of meetings, recordings at meal times, shorthand notes taken in shepherds and servants meetings, all that kind of thing. Until they actually know what's actually said in that place, they don't know anything.
David Courage makes a final impassioned plea.
This is people's lives. You can't just go, oh, this is a community, what can we do? Like, you're ruining people's lives by your inaction. By not doing anything, you are complicit with what's happening in Gloriavale. The disregard for people's basic human rights, you're complicit in that if you're doing nothing because they're a community. How are they actually affecting change? They can say they're willing to do something. The leadership's willing to do something. Rubbish.
But it's a community. But it's a community. I'm like,
there are laws in this country that make you enabled to do something. And it's not just about freedom of religion and freedom of belief. Gloriavale will play that card till they die. It's got nothing to do with that. Why does the leadership's religion and belief trump every other person in that place? That's clear. That's clearly what the Bill of Rights was built for. That no one person would be left behind. No child left behind. OT, no child left behind.
yes, that's right.
Oh. There it is, ladies. That's what I've been working on this week. What are your thoughts?
I hope everyone appreciated that reference to Hunt for the Wilder People, one of New Zealand's funniest movies.
Classic.
It's a cult classic, and the little joke there was actually a social work Oranga Tamariki reference. So that's why it's particularly relevant that no children should be left behind.
Yes.
And unfortunately, there's 350 of them currently being left behind. And I think probably what I failed to say so far and in this conversation is what I cannot get out of my head is how Rebecca, the journalist, posed this question: are they safe and not being exploited? She kept on posing that question to these 3 different politicians, people in positions of power, and every single one of them did not answer it. And that's just like, they couldn't answer that question. It's
disturbing.
It doesn't matter for those 350 children, but I can guarantee it matters for their own children.
Because I was sitting there going, how hard would it be for a politician to say, or for one of these ministers to say, yes, it is very disturbing what is going on. And yes, it is very distressing. And to acknowledge that there is pain and harm, and to lead with that and to say, we know it's complicated, we know there's harm, and we're terribly sorry we haven't been able to achieve the outcomes that we might have. And then to say we're working on it. Because even if there was just some acknowledgement of the harm, an acknowledgement of the distress, an acknowledgement of how slow they've been, how hard is it to say that stuff? And it would make you just take a big sigh of relief. You would feel like, they hear us. Whereas something that's just so confronting is that it feels like there's a complete denial almost even of the harm that's going on. They're straight in defensive mode. They're straight into image management.
I know.
Of their response. And I'd just love to say to them, I hope they watch this, and I would love to say to them, how hard is it to acknowledge the harm? Because man, we'd love to hear you own that, because you can own that as well as say we're working on stuff.
And they actually are compounding the harm because they've actually not been willing to this point to acknowledge that. It compounds the harm. The leavers, and the people in there, they're adding to their burdens.
Yeah,
but they're not.
Some of those leavers or the people who've been talking said something about hopelessness. And it may have been a few steps back. They talked about
lose the will to hope and dream.
Yes,
and then another one said it would push you devastating, and it would push you to the edge.
So when you start to hope that action will be taken, you start to think change might come, and you look outside of the walls of this community that you're imprisoned by, and you think that you'll be rescued. And then instead of a rescue, you get this really, really average just like tick box exercise of a rescue.
It's very, very frustrating. And I think the fact that someone in there mentioned the creeping closer to the edge, they're talking about ending your life, and lose the will to hope and dream. We're talking suicidal ideation, which is very high in Gloriavale. And so this is serious business. This is not a joke. This is not a joke. No. And that's it. Who's going to go and rescue those people?
Wow.
Yeah.
And like we see all these stories in the news of people who every so often you hear about someone who's been kidnapped and kept in a room somewhere, and it stirs compassion, and there's a rescue, and which is awesome, of course. But there's something about the walls around those individuals that helps us to really understand that those women, those individuals who've been kidnapped and contained in this space by an awful abuser, we can understand that. We can understand and see that she cannot escape until some action is taken. But these people are also they're also in a tiny little room.
Yeah, but they've got a trauma bond, some of them. to their abusers and they don't recognize it, and they say, no, I'm really happy here. I love it here. I love my life here.
Exactly.
And what can you do about that?
And to have, and to just to think of 350 children, is that defined as under 18?
I think that's their under 18 or their under 20.
Or the under 20s,
figure.
yeah, because
maybe under 18.
like, wow, that's a whole primary school and all that kind of thing, eh? Like in some ways, because we don't see their faces or their photos, it's easy to like somehow kind of not connect with them. But that image that keeps showing up of young people, guys and girls, I don't know if it's a choir or something, but yeah, I found that moving to look at that and to go, wow, you're already teenagers by the looks, or young adults, some of them, but to go, you've never chosen your own outfit for the day.
No.
Like, just that's beyond belief, let alone your own, Yeah,
that particular picture, we took that picture. It was them performing at the Gloriavale concert when we went there 8 years ago. We're not allowed back, of course. And you know what I did when I watched it? I went, oh, you've left. Oh, you've gone. Oh, you've got.
Really?
Wow. Like, quite a significant number have gone. But I can tell you, it's not because the doors at Gloriavale are open. It's because there are people, an amazing network of people that have gone and done some pretty incredible things in Gloriavale. There's been all sorts of extractions and all sorts, and empowering has gone on, and the gospel has gone in and really impacted many people's hearts, and they've left to go find a healthy expression of faith. So it's not been because Gloriavale opened the doors, I can tell you that.
It's just striking me right now is that there's this community with this children being harmed, but there's also every year, every 6 months, every year, it's a short time in a child's life. Like the difference between a 12-year-old who, is a child and a 15-year-old who's getting close to being an adult. 3 years, that's enough time for that person, that kid to turn into a perpetrator. So that they've had this microcosm of abusive concepts and indoctrination about the role of women and the powerlessness of individuals and the subjugation and the oppression of the leadership happening, and they've been watching how to be powerful, and in that while we're sitting doing nothing, 3 years a 12-year-old boy can become a 15-year-old abuser, and like that's a horrifying thought, that idea of when a kid loses the safety of innocence and moves into a place of no longer being, becoming a perpetrator themselves. And this community is creating perpetrators too, not just victims. It's creating perpetrators, and
dozens,
that's devastating.
Dozens and dozens of them.
Devastating for the families as well as the victims.
Yes, and if you've got dozens and dozens and dozens of perpetrators, then you can bet your bottom dollar you've got more than dozens of victims. And that is true.
Yeah.
That is right.
And those perpetrators may also be victims as well. And they're victims of a community that creates them as perpetrators.
Yeah. But there is police reports have shown it's an ongoing cycle that they can trace all the way back over to Springbank. Very, very disturbing.
Wow.
So months and a few years desperately matters.
It does.
There's something about a person who is indoctrinated for years and eventually comes somehow with no resources on the outside world, with no information, risking losing everything. There's something really quite remarkable about these individuals. The courage, the tenacity, the intelligence for them to get to this point where they can extract themselves.
Nice.
They're a remarkable bunch, to get out, to get out and to get out with a sense of intactness and to rebuild. It's remarkable.
I think on the I agree with what you're saying, that lots, if not all, of the people who leave have got some hard won wisdom and do have incredible courage and tenacity often. But I think, just to flip it as well, and I apologize if there's a down buzz, but to also acknowledge that unfortunately for so many of them, again, probably you could even say all of them, there are significant and often lifelong ramifications that are negative and harmful for people who leave these types of high demand groups. So that's the hard side, is that like really, and if you take it to facts and figures, and again thinking of the government, I would say that there's a huge burden on our healthcare system, physically and mentally and financially in all sorts of ways, as a result of some of the lifelong impacts that where people who have left these groups, try as they might and bringing every resource they've got in the bag, they are carrying heavy loads and often carrying them for life as a result. So that's the flip side of it.
I think if we can hold both those things, this remarkable respect, but also a deep compassion for the work that needs to be done, to stay whole, I think. Which blows apart the cliches about people in cults, and I think I want to keep digging into the complexity, because it's easy to be simple about this.
And often Gloriavale leavers, they've got such a great sense of humour, like wit. They're quick to laugh, and they said it was a survival mechanism, while they were in there. And so when they come out here, and you saw at the end of this video, just this fantastic bit of humour just coming right on through, this really serious ending finishes with a fantastic laugh. And I think that sums it up really. They needed to survive, and that's what they've developed, and we get to enjoy all those amazing parts of their personality. They're fantastic people. We really love them. What did you think about Virginia's comment? If you teach people something long enough, they'll believe it, and they'll teach their kids. And she said, and I know because I did it. So she wants to keep coming back to it is what you believe. It's not just your harmful practices, but their harmful practices are informed by some of their beliefs. And until they're willing to take a look at their beliefs, and they have given no indication yet that they're willing to even make the connection between what's happened now, abusers in there actually still just want to say, no, it was me and I can take responsibility for it, but it's got nothing to do with this. They're still protecting the system. And we're like, well, you haven't got it then, because until you can take a good hard look at and honestly at yourselves, I can't see how there can be that systemic change. And that tokens of change comment that one of the people inside Gloriavale mentioned always strikes me. Tokens of change. And the concept, they'll just revert back when no one's watching.
Yeah.
What did you think about Victory's line? How do you have your own money when you don't have your own life?
Oh, that was a fantastic comment, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. How could you have anything?
Yeah, they're so eloquent with how they sum up some of the, they get to the heart of it, eh?
They're like the kings and queens of one-liners, and there might have been a reference there that people didn't recognise about Ananias and Sapphira. Just for the last 20 years, Gloriavale have taught about the story in the scriptures, Ananias and Sapphira, a couple.
Is that the salt pillar? No,
they held back money.
Yes, and they got struck
there was
down.
Dishonesty, and they got struck down. And so
in the early Christian church.
And so basically, Gloriavale likes to say, if you withhold money and don't give everything over to us, you will be struck down. So like they say, it is a death threat in Gloriavale.
Wow.
And so now that they are now that they've been forced to have some bank accounts that they had open access to, thanks to some of the court cases, was just optics, and they've got these cards, but they're still not actually allowed to manage their money or keep it. They keep preaching what they've preached for 20 years about Ananias and Sapphira. So you or I, or someone who might not be familiar, or the general public or a politician, would just gloss over. If I was to tell them that they were preaching on Ananias and Sapphira, they wouldn't realise what that meant. But it's a death threat to someone in there. You will be struck down if you withhold your finances from this group. That's actually quite serious. It's not anything to gloss over. And that's how these guys work. They weaponise their faith.
It's a token gesture to give people a bank account. Like you're saying, it without a change in what they're taught and the freedom to actually pursue their own choices at the heart, it doesn't matter if they've got a bank account. It doesn't matter if they got forced breaks or, weekends off. It wouldn't matter if the teaching is still oppressive.
That's
based
right.
based on coercive control.
And guess who decides, who tells them about the forced breaks? It's always the leadership. It's someone else dictating to them still the terms of their life, which, like Victoria said, is not their own. And I think that's the crux of the matter. So I guess as we sort of wrap this up, we need to be looking really hard at, do we have slavery, modern day slavery happening here in New Zealand? If so, what are our MPs going to do about it? What can we do about it? What can New Zealand do about it? And do we care about the lost tribe on the west coast of Gloriavale? Well, I do.
Yeah, those are such great questions because, as always, I'm, wanting to go, what do we do then? Like, where's the note of hope here? Because, to be honest, this has been a really sobering couple of hours listening to all that stuff, and it is depressing. So, Liz, can you direct us to a note of hope, or something we can do? You're saying to share this video with our local politicians?
Yeah, share it, email them, ask them, will they support a Royal Commission of Inquiry into Gloriavale? And I mean, we're people of faith, and so we do believe that, that God has the ability to change hearts and minds, and I guess he can work on the politicians and the people and the leaders living inside Gloriavale and give strength to those who need to find a way out. So, yeah, there's a lot that can be done, and we just need to, take it seriously as something we can do for people living locally in our country. We can show love, care, hope and support and help those who leave, show them there's another way to live, a better way to live. So it's a very hope-filled story, but you're right, you can get bogged down and it can seem depressing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I have hope. I think that's why we're doing what we're doing here, right? Isn't it?
Yeah,
We want to be part of a conversation that moves along with the momentum that the interest in Gloriavale is bringing to sort of lift national consciousness above the sort of a fairly shallow understanding of what cultic harm is to something that has teeth, and where we can all be much more capable of having compassion and care, and more able to cult-proof our own lives and get educated about how to be less naive and more compassionate, which I've said. Anyway, so if you've enjoyed today's episode, please keep listening to more episodes of Cult Chat on Plains FM or your favourite podcast platform. We have reference throughout this podcast the two video, it comes in one video, doesn't it, Liz, that Liz made about Gloriavale. It's called Setting the Record Straight. It's on YouTube, and the link to that YouTube video will be in the
show notes.
The show notes, thank you. Tell your friends about Cult Chat and leave a review on our Facebook page so our message can spread further throughout the cultiverse. And we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks, everyone. Great to have you along for the ride.
Next time. Bye now.
Bye, everyone.
If anything in today's episode was upsetting for you and you'd like to talk to somebody, free call or text 1737 for support from a trained counsellor. Or visit the resources section on the New Zealand Olive Leaf Network website for a range of resources that might be of interest and use to you. The views, thoughts and opinions expressed in this podcast are the speakers alone, and Cult Chat does not necessarily share or endorse them.